Hello everyone, I'm your hostess with the mostest 8-second gaming, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the Season 23 Split 1 early legend tier list. I've had a little bit of time to play the season now, I've been watching a ton of streams, and I think I have a good grasp on what the meta is currently. But if you guys are new to the channel and you haven't yet, you have to check out the GameLeap website right now. Over there we have top level coaches creating the best, most highly informative guides to make you the best player you could possibly be. We have legend guides, gun guides, VOD reviews, and much more. Seriously, there are literally hundreds of guides on the site already for you to go check out and make you the best player you could possibly be. So click the link in the description, pick yourself up a membership, and start to improve today. But okay, with that covered, let's hop into things. And to start things off, we have the D tier, aka the Mirage tier, because he's the only one down here, and he's probably going to be the only one down here for a very long time. Seriously, Mirage is not a good legend when it does come to the ranked leagues. Now going into the season, he did get a little bit better because they did make it so that the health bar doesn't show on the real Mirage, but there are still many other ways to tell which one the real Mirage is when he does pop his ultimate. So that's still easily countered. And he also did get a buff with the support class passives, so now he does have those extra benefits for him. But Mirage still does not fill a role in the team. He leaves a ton of gaps on team comps, and he has a lot of exploitable weaknesses. Now don't get me wrong, Mirage is a fun legend to play. When I'm messing around with friends, I do enjoy playing Mirage every now and then, but he is not a good legend, so he is staying in the D tier. Moving forward though, we have the C tier, and there are 5 legends finding themselves here. We have Ballistic, Crypto, Octane, Loba, and Rampart. Now starting off with Ballistic, he does have kind of the same pitfall as Mirage, where he doesn't really fit a role in the team. He kind of is a secondary fragger, but he doesn't really have anything that benefits the team over somebody else in the meta right now, and he doesn't really affect games the way that he should. Respawn has kind of designed him as this super aggro, aggressive style of character, but he doesn't really get to do that in game. Now I do hope that Respawn does actually buff Ballistic going into the future, because I myself wouldn't be too opposed for a Ballistic meta. I think that'd be a little bit more interesting and it'd be a little bit more aggressive. But for right now, he just doesn't have enough impact on the game to make him anything more meta than a C tier legend. Moving on though, we have Crypto, and this is probably the most surprising legend in the season with how far he's moved down the tiers, because last season he was like an S tier legend. But there are so many changes that did come into this season where now he's not as good. His EMP no longer blows up Gibraltar bubbles. His cloaking isn't as good. His drone now takes zone damage. All were really necessary for Crypto because he was in a little bit of an overpowered state, and he made games a little bit more boring and more drawn out, and it just was not good for the meta. However, right now it does seem that Crypto is back to being kind of a useless state because he doesn't really counter anything currently, and he doesn't really have a spot in the meta. It's a little bit too fast paced for Crypto. It's a little bit too standoffish for Crypto because now the standoff characters he doesn't counter. So right now, Crypto just doesn't really have a spot in the meta. Going forward, if we see Gibraltar and Newcastle kind of falling out a little bit, maybe Watson taking a spot in the meta, then Crypto can counter Watson. But for right now, he has fallen from grace and he is now in the C tier. Next up, we have Octane, and Octane is just the epitome of a selfish legend. His entire kit is based around him. And yes, teammates can use the jump pad, but it's not really used for teammates. It's used to get him in and out of fights. Octane can have some insane movement with the stim and some of the movement techniques he can pull off, but for the most part, he just, again, doesn't fill a spot on a team better than any other legend, and for right now, he doesn't synergize well with other legends, so he doesn't really have a spot in the meta, so that's why he is a C tier legend. Next up, we have Loba, and this is one of the ones that I had a little bit of a difficult time placing, because I'm not necessarily thinking that Loba is a bad legend in the meta, it's just that she isn't really being picked. There's no real spot on a team comp where you would rather have Loba over another legend. She has some good benefits to a team, and she can actually be pretty useful in some certain situations, but right now there are just so many better options out there, and in my opinion that does drop you down the tiers when you don't really have usefulness on a team comp. This is one that I don't really know where to put her, so I am open to some opinions. Leave them in the comments down below. And last in the C tier, we have Rampart. Now Rampart is one of the legends that a lot of people get baited by, because when you actually get to set up her walls, she can be very oppressive and devastating. But as soon as you get out of like gold and you start getting to like Platinum, Diamond, Master, stuff like that, people actually don't let you set up the walls the way that Rampart wants to set those up. They target the Rampart, they force the walls down, they don't let you play Rampart. She has too many exploitable holes, and because of that, it just causes weaknesses on teams. She is very easily singled out, and then that makes for a very fast 3v2, and your team is just down at disadvantage the entire time. But the reason that I have her in C tier and not D tier is because if you actually get to set those walls up, or you get to just use Sheila, you can be good in situations. But most of the time, teams aren't letting you get there, so that's why she's C tier, not D tier, and yeah, here she stays. But that's the C tier covered, so let's move into the B tier, and there are 6 legends finding themselves here. We have Vantage, Catalyst, Caustic, Fuse, Lifeline, and Seer. Now starting off, we have Vantage, and Vantage is another one of the legends, kind of like Crypto, where she just got a huge buff. She was really scary, but right now she's just not in the best spot either. And the biggest reason that did come into play there was because she did lose the ultimate accelerants. With ultimate accelerants turning into purple instead of blue, they are less likely to be showing up, and instead of being able to stack like 2 or 3 in her inventory, she's barely getting 1 throughout the game. If you're playing Vantage and you find a decent amount of ultimate accelerants, you should be buying a lottery ticket because they are pretty rare now. And because of that, Vantage doesn't get to spam out the sniper shots. She is a little bit weaker because of that. Her bread and butter is her sniper rifle. That thing is super deadly. But now, instead of being able to just take shots at whatever you want, you have to actually play around the bullets, and you can't really do the things that you wanted to do when she was super strong. She is still a good legend, and is why I'm putting her in B tier, because the sniper rifle can still be fairly oppressive, and even just the threat of the sniper rifle can be good for your team. But overall, she's not a standout legend, and again, you're not really taking her over some of the options that are available right now, so that's why I think she's B tier. Next up, we have Catalyst, and Catalyst can be a strong legend on certain maps, and especially on Stormpoint, which is in the ranked rotation, she can be great for rotations. But again, she has some exploitable weaknesses, and she isn't the best option that is out there right now. She's good for team comps that want to play around her, and if you are going to be picking up a Catalyst, you kind of have to formulate a plan around her playstyle. And if you do that, then she is a good pickup. But for the vast majority of the player base out there, most people aren't going to be playing around her the way that she needs to be played around, so you're not going to be getting the full usefulness out of her. So that's why I think she is a B tier legend, because she requires so much setup and she requires so much time and effort put around her that I don't think she's anything higher than a B tier legend. Moving on though, we have Caustic, and Caustic is a legend that is constantly moving up and down in the meta, and I hate how inconsistent he is. Now this isn't to say that Caustic is a weak legend, but right now it just doesn't seem like he has a spot in the meta, and there are just so many better options when it does come to a support legend. Now I understand that Caustic is a control legend, but when it comes to his role in the team, he is a support, so that's why I'm saying that. He can still backline effectively, he can still lock down buildings effectively, but in terms of the meta, I don't think he's super standoutish right now, and that's why I'm putting him in the B tier. Next up, we have Fuse, and Fuse is usually a legend that I do put in C tier because I don't think he's that effective, and especially right now in the meta, I still don't think he's super standout either. There's just so many different movement techniques that people can use to get out of his mother load, and the knuckle cluster doesn't really do the same job that it should be doing. It's not super scary, it's not super effective. But the reason that I have him in this B tier spot instead of the C tier spot is that he does have access to ring consoles, so he adds some flexibility to your team meta comp. You can have the assault legend to open up assault bins, but you can also have access to the ring console, so if you're running a support legend or even double supports, you still have access to that knowledge, which helps you plan out your rotations, helps you plan out your game, and helps you concentrate on different aspects of the game without having to guess them. So because of that flexibility and that opening, I do think the Fuse is a B tier legend, not a C tier legend, so that's why I'm putting him here. Now next up, we have Lifeline, and this is probably going to be the most controversial pick on this entire tier list, but I think that a lot of people are getting blinded by recency bias. Lifeline is so much better than she used to be. I'm not trying to say that she's a bad legend right now. She is in a fantastic spot for what Lifeline is supposed to be, but Lifeline's kit as a support legend and a support class last isn't as strong as the other supports that are out there right now. A good support has a way to help your team get back into the fight if things do go wrong, but also a good support has a way to keep their team from going down in the first place. For example, Gibraltar has his bubble, Newcastle has his multitudes of shields, those kinds of things. But apart from Lifeline's new ultimate, she doesn't really have that same effectiveness, and you're not really blowing a high ticket item like a Lifeline ultimate to keep one person from going down most of the time. The Lifeline revived rework is fantastic, and I've actually been playing a lot of Lifeline recently because she's so much fun to play, but I don't think she's the standout legend that people think she is, and once we actually start to get through things a little bit more, I think a lot more people will see that. But again, I understand this is going to be a controversial opinion, so I'm open to hearing some other opinions in the comment section below. And lastly, in the B tier, we have Seer. Now, Seer is not in the best stance right now when it does come to the meta. Everything is really fast paced, and Seer does require a little bit more setup time in order to get full effectiveness out of his kit. Now, if you are able to actually get his scan down or his ultimate down, it is useful. Having wall hacks in fights is never a bad thing, but that setup time usually doesn't actually get to happen in fights, and by the time anything like that actually goes down, teammates are being overrun and you're just losing the fight to begin with. There are better options when it comes to some scan legends, and there are just better options when it does come to positions that he was being filled by, so yeah, that's why I think that Seer is a B tier legend. But that is the B tier done and dusted, so let's move into the A tier, and there are a bunch of legends finding themselves here. We have 8 legends. There's Ashe, Bloodhound, Conduit, Horizon, Mad Maggie, Revenant, Watson, and Wraith. Starting off, we have Ashe, and Ashe is one of the legends that was actually pretty meta when she first came out. People were using her, people were liking her, people were finding some different ways to incorporate her into team comps, but then she did receive some changes, she received some nerfs, the meta was shifting a little bit, so she fell in the tiers, but now she's actually starting to snake her way back up. And a lot of that actually does come from the greedy snare. That thing is super broken, and I think a lot more people are starting to realize that with how many Ashes I have seen recently. But that, on top of her being able to gather a bunch of information with her passive and also have a fantastic relocation tool built in with her ultimate, does make Ashe a pretty decent legend. And I am an Ashe fan. I do like Ashe. I think that having her in the meta isn't a bad thing, and I actually would love to see Ashe be played a little bit more. I think a lot of people still need to understand how good she is, but right now it just doesn't feel like her kit is that good to be anything higher than A tier. It's strong, it's good, but her spot in the meta just, isn't quite there yet to put her any higher, but still a solid A tier legend. Next up, we have Bloodhound, and Bloodhound is the aggressive scan character. Seer requires that setup time to get the scans out there. Bloodhound does not. They're in the fight, they're getting the information out, they're getting the ultimate down to give them that insane speed boost, and although it does not see through smokes anymore, it's still fantastic because you're moving a lot faster, your strafe speed's faster, you're harder to hit, you're more elusive, you're more aggressive. It's just a lot of really good things combined into one kit. Now, even though Bloodhound has been on the receiving end of some pretty harsh nerfs that have made them the A tier legend instead of the S tier legend that they were, they're still a very solid pickup and still a really good option if you want to have that information in fights. Now, next up, we have Conduit, and going into this season, Conduit did get some pretty nice quality of life buffs, which does help her if her teammates are not in the fight anymore. She can be a little bit faster, she can be a little bit more elusive, and she just already had a pretty strong kit to begin with, so this just made her even better. It's not enough to bring her back into like the S tier, but it is a good enough reason to keep her in the A tier in my opinion. She's good at resetting fights, she's good at keeping your team healthy in fights, she can cut off rotations, she can cut off people from pushing you, she has so many different options that the aggressive support playstyle wants. I really like Conduit, I think she's in a good spot right now, A tier she is. Now next up we have Horizon, and this is another legend that is constantly flip-flopping in my mind. Sometimes Horizon seems like the most broken legend in the game, and it seems like they are just super overpowered, and then other times it just doesn't seem like they do much. And currently we don't see a lot of Horizons running around, so I did have a pretty tough time figuring out what kind of season it is for Horizon, but I do think that Horizon is one of the legends that can withstand the test of time and still be a decent A tier legend, because the gravity lift is just good on its own. The black hole, good on its own. Her passive can be useful in situations, it's more of just kind of an annoying thing, but overall her kit is just too good to not be anything other than an A tier legend right now, so that's why I'm putting her in the A tier. Now next up we have Mad Maggie, and this is a legend that I was debating putting in the S tier, but I don't think they're S tier quite yet. Mad Maggie is still incredibly strong, and shotguns in the meta right now are super strong, so she pairs really well with them. But right now, supports are running the meta, and again, Maggie, like Crypto, did receive a nerf going into Season 23 where her ball no longer destroys Gibraltar's Dome of Protection. So that's another huge counter to Gibraltar that is now taken away, so now Gibraltar has a really strong defense against Maggie. You can still use your Riot Drill through his dome, it still does cover a decent amount of it, especially with the bigger drill. But Gibby's team still does have options if that is going on. They can play behind the dome, they can play around the fire a little bit. There is still some counterplay instead of the dome just being broken by one ability. And because Maggie's kit isn't overtuned enough, that's why I'm putting her in the A tier, not the S tier. It's just my opinion on that. Let me know what you guys think. Now, next up we have Revenant, and this is a legend that once they did receive their rework has just been hit by nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf after nerf because Revenant Reborn was such a strong rework. And even though they have received so many nerfs, Revenant is still in a really good spot because of just how evasive and elusive and just aggressive he can be in fights. It doesn't matter what kind of situation they're in. If it's verticality, they could just use their passive to climb. If the team is really far away, they could use their tactical to just jump on them. If they need that extra boost of health, they have that ultimate. Revenant just has so many things packed into his kit that it's hard to say anything other than A tier right now. If he continues to receive nerfs going into the second split and also into the more seasons, then he might actually fall out of A tier, but for right now his kit is still pretty strong, so I think he's still an A tier legend. Now next up we have Watson, and Watson is going to be the go-to control legend if people want to play a control legend. Her kit is very strong to begin with, but now they have changed one of her class passives to be able to have the same buffs that the support legends got, and that is incredibly strong. Having the support ability to be healing faster, reviving faster, stuff like that on a control legend as strong as Watson is just, oh, it's amazing. I love it. And I am a little bit biased when it does come to Watson because that's who I played when I played competitively. I love Watson. And right now I do think that Watson is in a good spot, and I do think that she might be seeing a little bit more play in the meta if people are wanting to lock down buildings and get the benefits that support legends are getting. So keep an eye out for some Watson players in the future. And last in the A tier, we have Wraith. And Wraith was usually an S tier legend. She was one of the legends that was just constantly in there because she did what no other legend was able to do, being able to play super split from her team and be safe in doing so. But now with the meta shifting and people being super aggressive and deathballing things, Wraith can get caught out a little bit easier, and she's also no longer the only legend that can do that. There are some really good options for team mobility, there's some really good options for playing split from your team, and also there's just a lot of really good options in the entry fragger position, so Wraith no longer has that uniqueness, but she's also still pretty strong. She has a good kit overall, so she's not anything lower than A tier, she's just not the S tier legend she used to be, so that's why she's staying here. But that is the A tier done, so we can move into the next tier, which is the secretly broken tier. These are legends that are going to be flying under the radar, and people aren't going to be giving them the respect that they deserve. And there are still two legends here. We have Gibraltar and Alter. Now, first off, Gibby received so many buffs going into this season. His dome was already strong to begin with, and now they just made it even better. And if you take the baby bubble perk, you're getting a new bubble like every 12 seconds. It is ridiculous, and how strong shotguns are right now pairs incredibly well with how good Gibraltar is, especially at controlling the flow and pacing of fights, because if you don't have a shotgun and he tries to bubble fight you, the Gibraltar's winning that 9 times out of 10. Gibby is actually so strong right now that he is kind of warping the weapon meta, because Gibby is being played more and more and more, and if Gibby's being played more, you have to run a shotgun in order to actually be able to bubble fight him. So when a legend is warping the weapon meta, that is something that you have to take note of. But the reason that I have him in secretly broken and not actually in the S tier is because a lot of players that are still in the game currently weren't in the game when Gibraltar was the Goliath that he was in the early seasons. They weren't there for that Gibby meta, they weren't there for that bubble fighting meta, so they don't actually give Gibby the respect that he deserves in these fights. As the season goes on and people actually start to understand how good Gibby is, I'll probably just move him out of the secretly broken tier into the S tier, but until then, right now he is secretly broken. Do give Gibby the respect that he deserves. And in the secretly broken tier, along with Gibby, we do have Alter. Now, Alter, I do think, is one of the strongest legends that this game has ever introduced. She has so much potential in her kit, and because she's new, we actually don't understand how good she can be quite yet. Now you guys got to remember, for season after season after season, I was telling you that Newcastle was an S tier legend. Newcastle's strong, you have to believe me, and nobody actually paid attention to me. But now we're seeing how good Newcastle is. He's super meta, and people are saying, oh, why didn't anybody tell us that Newcastle was this strong? I did tell you, and now I'm telling you how strong Alter is. Her passive can be really clutch in fights to get you more ammo or more meds or something along those lines. It's not the best passive in the world, I will give you guys that, but it is kind of fun to use in some situations. But her tactical allows so much counter and outplays that it's just absolutely insane. Being able to jump through walls on people when they're least expecting it is strong. Being able to kidnap somebody through a wall when they're trying to heal is strong. She has so many different options for her tactical, it's incredible, and a lot of people don't actually realize how good this tactical can be. And when it comes to her ultimate, this I think is one of the strongest abilities in the game currently. You remember how I was saying that Wraith was an S tier legend because she could play split from her team and be safe in doing so? Yeah, Alter allows the entire team to play split and be safe while doing so, because you just have a control legend like Watson or Caustic sit back on the Rift. If anything goes wrong, Alter or the other teammate could just jump back to the control legend, and if anybody happens to follow Alter or her teammate through that portal, they're just going straight to their death. Alter just allows so much flexibility, creativity, and outplay in her kit, and I think a lot more people need to start understanding this. She's one of the strongest legends in the game right now. You have to listen to me. I called it on Newcastle, I'm calling it on Alter. But now we can move out of the secretly broken tier and into the S tier. These are the top legends that you're going to be wanting to play right now. And there are 3 legends in S tier. We have Pathfinder, Bangalore, and Valkyrie. Now starting off, we have Pathfinder, and Pathfinder is really good at being aggressive and allowing his team to have some relocation tools while being extremely safe in doing so, because that energized zipline, really hard to actually shoot someone off of when they're riding that. He's a good entry fragger. The only thing that's really holding him back right now is still his hitbox. If Respawn made his hitbox just a little bit smaller, he would be one of the most overpowered legends in the game and be super groundbreaking. And honestly, I would like to see Pathfinder's cooldowns go back to how they used to be, because the OG mode has me reminiscing on like the nostalgic days of Pathfinder being super broken with how fast his cooldowns were. But I understand that they can't go back to that, because back then Pathfinder was just way too broken. He still is a good legend though. He still has a ton of good options for his team. He's an S tier legend right now. I think a lot of people understand how good Pathfinder is. Moving forward though, we have Bangalore, and Bangalore has received a few nerfs over the past couple seasons that a lot of people were thinking was going to drop her out of the S tier, drop her out of the meta, but she's still a fantastic legend. Her passive is still really good for allowing her to be a little bit more aggressive, be a little bit more elusive, and be harder to hit. Her tactical is still great at cutting off line of sight from other teams trying to fight you, great at cutting off line of sight during fights that other teams have to be super aggressive onto you, or you're able to heal, do some other things. And her ultimate is still her ultimate. It's really multifunctional. It's great in a lot of different situations. It can kill people. It can halt people's pushes. It can do so many different things. Bangalore is still an S tier legend. Don't let anybody fool you. But last in the S tier, we have Valkyrie. Now, when Valkyrie first came out, she was a legend that everybody ran. And if you didn't run Valkyrie, you were at a disadvantage. Respawn saw this, didn't like how the meta was going, nerfed her into the ground, released the mobile redeploy balloon so you didn't need a Valkyrie, but now over time she has been getting buff after buff after buff, and she's gotten back into the spot where she is super meta once again. Having Valkyrie with 2 support legends, with how strong the support legends are to just get you from point A to point B, is incredible. You have the relocation tool that those support legends lack, but the support legends are just able to just constantly revive each other and just make it so that you are just this walking Goliath essentially. And my favorite thing about Valkyrie is one of the class passive perks that she does get, where you can see literally through walls as you are flying, so you get so much information. You can see where teams are. You don't have to guess. It's really good. It's really effective for the team, and I think that Valkyrie is still an S tier legend. But that is the S tier done, and some people might be wondering why I've left out one legend in particular. Well, that's because Newcastle is so strong right now that he has actually broken my tier list, and for the first time ever, I am putting an S+ here. That is right, Newcastle has actually gone into his own rank, which is the S+ tier. I've never done this before, but Newcastle has just been getting buff after buff after buff after buff after buff after buff after buff. It is stupid how many buffs Respawn has actually given this man, and before he was strong. I've been telling people for seasons after season after season that Newcastle was a good legend. He was the best support legend in the game. He gave teams so many different options and opportunities and just spots to play, and then they just kept buffing him. And then last season, he came into the meta. People started to realize how good he actually was. And even after that, they decided to buff him again. There's so many different things in the game right now that just Newcastle counters and just shuts down completely. He is a one-man army. Your teammates could go AFK, pick the worst legends in the game. It doesn't matter. Newcastle will carry them to victory. He's just hands down the best legend in the game right now. But if you guys think that these legends deserve a different spot on the tier list, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, I am able to stream once again, so if you guys want to come check out my live stream, ask me questions, watch my own gameplay, then check me out on Twitch TV/8secondgaming. And if you guys want to stay up to date with the latest and greatest Apex Legends, tips, tricks, and news, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. Once again, I'm 8secondgaming. I'll see you guys in the next one.